Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to another episode of the Nat Bros podcast. And today, I've got the better half of the Nat Bros. Just because he decided to finally join us. Yay! And so, with that being said, we are going to be talking about a very challenging topic. It's one that is very heated, very there are very clear and distinct divides along certain lines. And so today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe versus Wade. And just kind of discuss kind of our own beliefs, our own feelings towards it, our own ideas towards the whole topic. And so that's what we're getting into today. And so, again, as always, if you're watching on YouTube, just click the subscribe. We'd love to hear your comments about this down below about what you think. If you're listening on your podcast, leave us a review and let us know what you think in that. We'd be very curious. We want you to join in this conversation. We're curious to hear your opinion, your ideas, your thoughts and feelings towards it. So, without any further ado, Andrew, do you want to talk about you can kind of just go wherever you want to, or I could start? How do you want to go about it?
First, I would like to just start by saying I kind of don't have a dog in the fight, I feel like, but at the same time, I kind of do, if that makes sense. Like I feel like what's funny is like you see people that are sitting here saying they're for the overturn of it, and then people are like, well, why do you get to make a choice about my body? But then somebody will come forward and be like, yeah, that's horrible what we're doing. They're like, yeah, we agree. Thank you for speaking up for us. It's like, I feel like first and foremost, me being a man, I don't know necessarily that if you're going to say that I don't have the choice to say you can't do it, then you shouldn't be taking my advice on whether or not I say you can do it, if that makes sense at all. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because like what pisses me off is like, if you're saying a man can't weigh on it, telling you what you do with your body, then don't be listening to men any other time of it either, right? That was
what do you mean? Be more specific. And what are they listening to men and then in this case not?
So people that are for abortion would say that a man saying, you shouldn't be getting an abortion. It's an it's abomination. It's against God's will. Then they're all like, well, you shouldn't even have a say in what I do with my body, right?
Okay.
And then you have a man on the other side where he's like, it's horrible what we're doing to y'all. I'm so sad that this is happening. And, same woman be like, thank you so much. That means a lot to me, how you feel about what I'm able to do with my body. It's like, so, one guy can say, hey, yeah, I agree with you. You can do this with your body. And you're okay with that because he's saying what you can do with your body fits in with what you want. Then you got someone over here who's like, no, you can't do that. And you're like, hey, you have no right to tell me what I can do with my body. So it's like, just say, men don't have a say in it at all. If you want to just be on that boat, just be on that boat,
I think the biggest thing is that it's not so much that they're listening to men who say like go ahead and do with your body what you want to do. It's just more that those men who agree that they can choose to do whatever they want with their body, I think that they're not necessarily listening to those men. It's just that those men are no longer are not the men who are quote unquote interfering with their choice of what to do with their own bodies. Like it's not so much that those men are giving permission and saying yes, you can do whatever you want with your body. It's more along the lines they're just not. They're basically where you're saying to be is they're just like, it's your choice, it's your body, you do what you want with it. As where for generally the ones who were saying, like the ones who are pro-life are like, no, you cannot do that because you say you have a choice, but the problem is that there's a life inside of you in that life. And so they're kind of the argument is that those people, those men who are saying those things are the ones who are coming in and interfering with their choice. And so it's not necessarily that they're listening to the men like that men are telling them, yes, you have my permission to do this, and they're listening to them. It's more that it's just the men who are saying, no, you can't do it, and that's what they have the problem with.
Right. Right.
So one of those things, one of the interesting things that kind of going into this idea of choices and body autonomy and stuff like that, because I'm sure we're going to hit all the other topics later on, but specifically towards that, one of the interesting challenges that I've heard, and it was really fascinating, is now now that the Supreme Court has relinquished, and so because I want to kind of like make sure that we get this out there. In my mind, and again, I could be wrong, but in my mind, the Supreme Court didn't necessarily say you can't have an abortion. What it is saying, it's saying that it is not federally protected, and that each state has its own right to determine whether to protect abortion or not. And that's what I've taken it as. And in
Right.
such cases,
There's not a clinic on every street corner now because different states hold different ideas on the subject matter. So yeah, I mean, I agree. People are making big old comments like, "Oh, we can't do this no more." Yeah, I mean, if you're really heartfelt about this whole abortion thing, you'll be able to find a way. You know.
but we'll get into the whole like whether the state's decisions and the intricacies of that. But going back to this idea of body autonomy, the idea is sorry, my phone's going off. The idea is that it somebody brought up a really good point where it does seem like the conservatives are and including the like libertarians even to an extent, it does seem like they are interested in telling women that they don't have the right to choose whether to have an abortion or not, and they don't really have the right to choose their own body autonomy. But these are also the same conservatives who were telling the federal government that the federal government doesn't have the right to tell them what to do with their bodies in the sense of like a vaccine mandate. So
Oh,
here
that is a
we,
good.
yeah,
That's a
that was a
very
fantastic point. I was like, dang, that's a good point. But like on one side, you have people who are like the conservatives who are like, no, we're not doing a mandate. Like you can't do a vaccine mandate because it's my body. I'm not putting stuff in my body that I'm not allowed to put in my body, right? But then on
right.
top, but then the argument changes when it comes to abortion, and where abortion is like, oh, you know what? I'm going to say you can't choose what to do with your own body here.
You know what's crazy is like people are just so blinded. Like you and I are sitting here talking, and like you and I were both raised Republican. I would say you're more communist now, but whatever. That's not important.
Listen, if I were more communist, then I would be 100% with the government telling everybody what to do with everything.
Oh, you know, we can't all be perfect. You know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
So, if people just actually thought levelly, like for instance, like you made that point and I never even thought of it, and you said it's like, yeah, you know what, that is a great point. You know that is a heck of a point. You know, and I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but at the same
mm-hmm,
time, it's like people are so fueled by emotion and hate
mm-hmm.
and rage and like they can't get past their own feelings of whatever. It's just, hey, let's step back and look at this a little clearer. For me personally, like the whole argument I hate about abortion should be legal is usually they make like the worst case scenario. A
Mm.
10-year-old gets raped and she's gonna have a baby. Well, you know what? You're right. That is a horrible thing, 100%. But you're not sitting here. 90% of abortions are not a 10-year-old having an abortion. It's all these kids that are out partying, doing whatever, and having no consequences for what they want to do with their lives. You know what I mean? Like, I, you got to understand both sides of it. It's not just the worst case scenario. It's also like, hey, you know what? This is every day somebody's making this choice, and it's not, they didn't make that choice willingly. It's they made that choice, and I'm not saying they should live with consequences.
You
I'm
you
not
mean
saying
you mean oh okay.
kid.
So you're saying the extreme cases they didn't make that choice willingly.
Right. The extreme case would be like someone gets raped or something like super
So
extreme. Yes, I understand. But that is your go-to argument. And it's like it's never not going to be just that is the only reason that they're pushing this thing.
well,
If that
let's
makes
go.
sense.
Let's so
Like
let's look.
it kind of pissed me off. I saw somebody post something on Facebook where they were all like, how early did you get your period? And I'm like, what? Like, who wants to see that on Facebook? Like, can we please not talk about that? Like, and they're like, but you want them to have a baby. I'm sorry, what? How does that correlate at all? Like there was no other tag to anything. That was just that was the first two comments. Uh, uh, when was your period, and why do you expect people that are so young to have babies? Who's expecting that? Like, what are you talking about? So, my wife's all like, oh, well, she was talking about this abortion, all this. I was like, well, maybe you should lead with that. Like you're over here acting like, we made a call or the government made a call to not enforce it on a federal statute or a federal platform. And now we just are just raping kids all over the place. Like, what the
Yeah,
crap?
that is a tactic for them to or no, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say for them, because I mean it's a tactic that people use in debates. It's like, let's go to either the straw man fallacy,
Yeah.
or let's go to let's do worst case scenario. Yeah, because the thing is like it's such a emotionally charged thing, and it is very like and something that's very interesting is like, because I was even talking to one of my colleagues about it. um he hails from California. He
Hmm.
just found out that his girlfriend is pregnant, or he found out that his girlfriend was pregnant 8 weeks ago. And at the beginning of it, he even said, like, he was like, yeah, you should get an abortion. We were just sitting down, we were just kind of discussing it and stuff. And like, I was kind of like curious about his own like views, and his own views are like, his views are like, abortion should be allowed, should be, federally mandated, like in his mind, like should be federally allowed. And I was just explaining to him, I think that it's just, I think it's going back to the States, and I think that that's okay. But that being said, too, let me ask you a question, because you kind of brought up the extreme circumstance, and I am kind of curious what you think. Do you think abortion should be allowed if it has something to do with like rape and incest, or the health of the mother?
Yes, honestly, as far as the health of the mother, 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 because I've dealt with that specifically where it wasn't necessarily like with like an ectopic pregnancy, which was something we had. It was life or death had they not injected her with like that Plan B or I'm not sure what they gave her, but something they gave her something that just kill off the eggs because otherwise it would have killed her either way.
Mm. Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, uh, I mean, and the other thing is like, I think a lot of the argument was, I don't know, man. It's such a fuzzy thing. No, I would not want a kid that got raped to go through that. I'm not saying that. For
Yeah.
me, it's simply like your friend. Your friend sat there and willingly stuck something in somebody else and got them pregnant. And now, instead of living with the consequences and not having a kid, he wants to just throw it away, which to me is not. It's like that whole society thing nowadays. It's like, well, I shouldn't have to do this, so I shouldn't have to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's what I feel like is wrong with society nowadays. Anyways, it's like there's no consequences for anything.
I got you. Have you talked to anybody who's like actually gone in and had an abortion, sans like incest, rape, or health, like barring that, but actually just went in as a way to have, I guess, like in essence, birth control, as you could say. uh and they went in and because they were like, for other reasons besides rape, incest, and their health. Have you talked with anybody about that?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Now that is a private thing, and I know that most people would not be gung ho with talking about that, and like no one would really be like, because that's a very private matter, and I know that like no one would be like absolutely one hundred
I want to
percent.
talk about this. Let's talk about this with you randomly,
Yeah, yeah,
stranger.
yeah, yeah. No one would just open up unless like they felt comfortable with you and actually wanted to uh, talk to you about it. So with that being said, as far as it being a private matter, I one of the things is like it's easy for you and I, and it's easy for Andrew and me to say like we think that it's mostly like they make a choice to have sex, and then they get pregnant, and they're like, oh no, let me fix my mistake. Like let me just do this. And again, like I don't know exactly the numbers of that. Again, like as far as the incest and the health of the mother and the rape, like those are smaller percentages by like a lot. But that being said, like the other aspects of it are also kind of the other problems that come along the way is like not talking with them, not discussing with them about it, and then being like trying to understand what the reason is. Now, I have heard that one of the major reasons is because either A, they're not financially prepared for it. B, they've got too much going on. C, like a myriad of reasons like this would change their lives. That also coupled with that when they did have sex, they were like some of them, and I don't know what the number is, but a certain amount of them were actually using birth control, but it failed. Now, I don't know what the numbers are exactly on like how much birth control you use. I'm sorry, not how much. How many people have used birth control and then it failed? I don't know what the numbers are exactly. But what I do know is that sometimes that does happen. I don't know how often, but it does happen. And when that happens, then normally it's like, okay, well, they didn't want to get pregnant. They weren't aiming to get pregnant kind of thing. I think it gets deeper on a more like familial like place and a more like local society kind of place where you're maybe you're not raised in a way where you feel that abstinence is like the right thing to do. And what we're trying to do, what it seems like conservatives are trying to say is if you're not married, you should not be having sex. Which I'm like, yeah, that'd be the ideal situation. That would be like the optimal situation. But that situation doesn't happen for a lot of people. Certain people, sure. And even then, maybe there's not talk in the house about, birth control. Maybe there's not discussions about why you should abstain. Maybe there's not discussions about certain things that are much more touchy and more related to this. But here now we're saying, okay, you now no longer have access to abortion. So yeah, it doesn't matter even if you were using birth control and you still got pregnant, you're pregnant. You should have abstained. But it's like we grew up in a household that really didn't really talk about sex that much. We had instances, but like it was just like don't have sex before you're married. Okay. But I don't know if we ever like had like a conversation with not just our parents, but even like the church leaders, even people who were like mentors to us. We didn't really have conversations with them about like why not? Like because it was like such a touchy subject. It was such a taboo subject. It was like don't talk about sex, and on top of that, don't have sex. You're like, can I ask a question? No talking about sex. What if I want to have sex? No, you can't have sex. It's like, then I don't know. Like we can't ask about it. We can't talk about it, and we can't do it. And so like that to me was kind of was an interesting thing. And I think a lot of the people who I don't know how many people are going out, having sex, getting pregnant, either because they didn't know about birth control, didn't know about abstinence, or had birth control, but it didn't work. And then now they're pregnant with like, I mean, when you get pregnant, I mean, it is a life altering decision. It is, I mean, it completely changes your life. Like my wife and I right now, we're trying to have a baby. And I know in my mind, I'm like, this is going to change our lives drastically. But I'm mentally prepared, physically prepared, emotionally prepared, financially prepared. Like I'm ready for this to happen. But those who are out there who aren't prepared for it, and even if they're taking everything that they can, all the precautions that they can, save for abstinence. Abstinence is the only answer to not getting pregnant, really. But like growing up in a house like we did, yeah, I understand that. But not everybody grew up in a household like we did. Not everybody was taught to believe the things that we believe. And even then, I'm gonna throw myself out there. Even though I was raised in a conservative Christian home, and even though I was taught that abstinence is the way to go, I was never really taught why, wasn't given the details, and I ended up not abstaining from sex before marriage.
Maybe the fact that we barely touched upon it ever was part of the reason that some of the issues we had growing up were there, if that makes sense.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Like the way we grew up is part of the reason why we.
Well, I'm saying we never talked about it. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, and so that's why we ended up like trying it out and stuff like that.
Right. That's why we strayed so far from
Gotcha.
godly presence.
So there was another argument that was brought up as to why the federal government should be protecting abortions across the board as opposed to the states protecting it. And that is mainly because like if you happen to live in a fairly affluent neighborhood and you happen to have influence is like basically like being able to have like a TV in the house, maybe a vehicle to drive around in, and like a single family home kind of thing. If you're living in kind of that situation, you could probably afford in a state, if you live in whatever state, like let's say it's Kentucky or Tennessee or I think Alabama or Georgia, we're going to say, or whatever states have allowed for these things to go through. If you live in a state like that and you come from a fairly high socioeconomic status, you can travel to a different state and get an abortion. Okay, if that other state, obviously allows it, you can do that. But for the poor people in those states, like the reversal of Roe v. Wade, all of a sudden prevents them from being able to have access to that. And it's not like they can just hop in their car because they may not own a car. Or it's not like they can all of a sudden just like get in a plane and fly to a different state because depending on how far away it is. And so the idea of going to a different state to have an abortion is like almost impossible to do. And so that's one argument that I heard for why Roe v. Wade should still be in place, is because like these poor people can't necessarily go to a different state and do it. Again, I love the idea of doing states' rights, but I also understand that coming from a fairly high socioeconomic class, I'm living in China for Pete's sake. Like how many, like there are plenty of people in the United States who cannot travel to a different country, let's say Mexico or Canada, which are fairly easy to get to, let alone a different state, let alone on the other side of the country, the other side of the world. So, like, I kind of understand that argument. Like, I can kind of reason with that argument. Now, this is also going back to that whole idea of how are these families going to be able to, like, take care of themselves if they're stuck in a place and they haven't learned about contraception, or if they have learned about contraception, the contraception failed, or they just forgot, or something along those lines, and so all of a sudden now they don't have proper access to abortion. But what do you think about that argument, as far as with it being in the States, like the poor people not being able to go, and also not having the knowledge or the access?
So far with the states, I mean, nobody's really banned it except Kentucky religiously so far. I mean, everybody else has within a certain amount of time you can have it within, if it's for the betterment or the health of the mother, you can still have it. And then, there's plenty of states that have time limits on it. I think Texas is like a 6-week after initial pregnancy, you get to have an abortion. So it's not, I mean, I don't think it's. I don't feel like demographics play that big a role unless someone's just like literally living underneath a bridge somewhere and can't get to a clinic safely and effectively and something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, let me paint a picture for you. Something to think about. I understand that I am in a very high socioeconomic place. Yes, I'm not Bill Gates. Yes, I'm not Jeff Bezos. Yes, I'm not any of those guys. But nevertheless, like
South African. I just want to point that out.
well, that's fine. But he's still a white male. Nevertheless, he's in a high socioeconomic place. But that being said, like thinking about let's say you have this girl. We'll call her a black girl. Okay, she was born into a poor family, or born into a family that didn't have a father. More possible, right? Born in a poor part of Jackson, Mississippi, because I think Mississippi also had some trigger laws prepared for the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So she's born in a poor part of Jackson, Mississippi, right? So the projects or the ghetto or anything along those lines, and she's raised in a single mother home, and the single mother is either on the one hand rotating through multiple boyfriends,
Ooh.
or hardly at home because she's got to work full time to take care of her child and or
Oh,
children.
I don't like this game anymore.
I'm just the thing is like because like these are things that like they come to mind for me because I don't get to see these stories daily. Like I'm not there. I don't. Let me say this. When I was living in America, like I didn't see these stories. These stories didn't come to the forefront of my mind or come in front of my eyes. But in China, I actually get to I don't necessarily get to see per se, but I kind of do. Like I can see the difference between someone who is in a very affluent neighborhood in Shanghai versus somebody who's in a poor neighborhood in Shanghai. And just seeing that, I can see how in a certain neighborhood you get a really great education, but in another neighborhood you get like garbage education. And I can see how that happens. And so knowing that that does happen in America, being very conscious of that, let's say this girl, she gets raised and she gets educated in a poor neighborhood, which is most likely. And so I don't want to call out teachers because I don't know what it's like to work in a poor neighborhood. I don't know what it's like to educate children in a poor neighborhood. I know the US is trying to work on people getting there, but you have this poor black girl who's raised in such a way, probably doesn't learn anything about sex, probably doesn't learn anything about what it means, why you should wait to have sex, because again, even her mother probably was along the same lines, or even if she, like without having a father, with these kinds of things. And again, I'm not sitting there and watch. I'm going to get crucified probably because I'm sitting there like saying it's a black girl, but this can be anybody. It can be a white girl. It could be anybody from the trailer park all the way to the hood, all the way to wherever. What I'm saying is like
Class society, socioeconomic people.
a lower socioeconomic person who probably ends up needing to drop out of school, and so isn't making a lot of money but has to make money for the family, possibly turns to one of the best paid that she can reach to, which would be sex work,
Oh wow,
if not drugs,
you going
if not.
super this
I
one?
mean, I mean, the thing is like it, like I I think it's very easy for people to kind of like get in their own bubble, and I know I was in my own bubble. And the thing is, like here, it's not
But
necessarily that anybody's doing sex work or drugs, but I could see where it would be very, very useful to the poorer people here to be able to make some money for their family in order for their family to just survive.
well, let me ask you this: from
Sure.
you being in a non-American country, what's abortion like over there?
Like a lot of Chinese people look at it and they're like, why does America have such a problem with abortion? Like,
So China just readily accepts it and just does
oh
its
yeah,
own.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, there was even there's even so one of the issues, one of the biggest challenges with China is when they were doing the one child policy, which now they're up to three. They're up to three child policy. But when they were doing the one child policy, basically it was like if you were they had to make the access to abortions because the law required them to have one child. So if you have one child and then you don't have contraception, you don't use any kind of contraception at all, and then you get pregnant with another one, it's like, what are we going to do? You either have an abortion or you got to pay the government. And obviously the government's like, well, we'll make abortion available to you. And so, yeah, there's not really any questions. Are there people who use it as a quote unquote get out of jail free card? Sure. Yeah, of course. And I bet that happens in the States too. But one big thing for me is like growing up in a very conservative Christian home where it was like, this is the death of a child. And while I still agree with that and I still, to an extent, understand that and kind of feel that, I have not had access to discuss or to talk with women who have gone through this scenario to understand their life, like what's going on in their lives, what's happening. I like the idea, again, I like the idea of Roe v. Wade going back to the States, but I would even say, what if, I think if they had what if there was a law in the federal books that said, if it has anything to do with rape, if it has anything to do with incest, if it has anything to do with the health of the mother, abortions are fine. And then the states can determine all the other ones. Like that to me is something that I would be curious about or interested in. There are actually 13 states that have banned abortion to some extent. And so with that being the case,
I mean, nowadays it's like there's 5 right now that's banned it, but there's still rules saying like they can have an abortion if it's like it's not 100% banned. You know, if it affects the mother's health, and then there's about 11 in reserve that are looking at moving along the same line. So
another argument that I heard was, it seems like the people who are pro-life and so anti-abortion are so focused on getting the life in the womb to come out and to be a baby. But if there are any policies that go with helping a mother out or helping raise the child or helping to give the child like some kind of like healthcare, free education, like making sure that single mothers have certain access, Medicaid, welfare, like these things that would help single mothers out or would help these children out and help these babies live, any of those get struck down by the same people who are against abortion. And I was like, I can't argue against that. Like there's a lot about that. It's like,
yeah.
oh, okay, if you get pregnant, you need to keep the baby, but you get no help.
This isn't a argument to where we have all the answers figured out. You know, I feel like, yes, there's always going to be something somewhere that we will never have an answer to. You know, the hard questions are hard questions for a reason. But the point is, it's like, there's no reason why nowadays in a society we live in, we can't come together as people and figure this thing out. You know, instead of fighting, bickering, and yelling, and saying who wants to be a 10-year-old and pregnant, like what? Like you putting like extremes out there, hoping they're what cause and fight, incite violence, like fight and bicker amongst ourselves when there's bigger problems going on in the world than that. I mean, honestly, it's at the end of the day, it's you have to live with what your choices are, just like I have to live with my choices. I don't have a say in it. I don't have a say with what you do. There's always going to be a way for you to get away with whatever you want to do, and it's more or less, you know, I don't agree with everything you choose, and I feel like half the time it's a scapegoat for people just not wanting to live up with consequences. But yes, there are other times where the worst case scenario happens, and when that happens, I think everybody needs to come together and make it work for that individual or whatever's happening.
I think the biggest thing, I think one of the things that likes to happen is I think a lot of our, and this is kind of like to go with a lot of stuff we've talked about, like whether it was gun control or furries or other things, I think I really do believe that the politicians, the people that we have in power, are so determined to villainize. I think that's a word. To
Balkanized.
villainize. No, not
No.
to villainize the other side so much that it's like you have to like, oh, okay, like you have to be against them so much, and so they bring out the extremes, and then that's just tearing our country apart. And that's one of the reasons why we have this podcast, is to have discussions about things, is to have a conversation, not just you and I, but also with the viewers, if anybody wants to comment, which I'm sure people are going to want to comment. Oh, did he do that? But like, I want to, like, this is one of the reasons why we have a podcast, is to have discussions about certain things that, yeah, we didn't really talk about, like things that growing up it was, or even now people just don't talk about. And like, we want to discuss them. We want to have conversations. We're very curious about how
Yeah.
people
Oh,
feel.
man.
And especially, I would love to hear from any woman out there that either has had an abortion, save for like incest, rape, or their health. I want to hear from them. I'm very curious to hear their opinion, very curious to hear what is going on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us during this conversation. This is a tough one. This is a rough one. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Click the bell. That way you can be notified about when we post next time. We're coming out every Friday, Friday morning. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Friday afternoon. And we'd love for you to hit the like button and leave us a comment in the section below. Like, what do you feel about Roe v. Wade? Like, we really want to hear your points. We really want to hear what you believe and what you feel about it. If you are listening on your podcasting app, please subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. That way we can reach out to all sorts of other people. There are going to be some videos that pop up. There's going to be a video list over here, and there's going to be some videos over here. It's just going to be all sorts of videos of things that we've talked about. Thank you for joining in. I'm Nick.
I'm Andrew.
And as always,
Thanks. You have an open invitation to our conversation.
bye-bye.